No one understands white supremacy quite like Billy Woods. His latest album, Golliwog, has been critically acclaimed for its cutting-edge production, razor-sharp lyrics, and themes of post-colonialism. He dissects a menagerie of topics, from vampires to childhood abuse to time travel. However, I think the first track off the album, Jumpscare, is particularly worthy of examination. Woods somehow manages to tie Five Nights at Freddy's, Stephen King, and post-colonial themes all together in one song with his signature dense, symbol-rich storytelling. At the core of it all is the ultimate horror, the inescapable evil that white supremacy has left us with. My name is Ray Garish, and I'm an English teacher that likes rap music. If you clicked on this video, I'm going to assume that you're already familiar with Billy Woods, but if you're not, here's what you need to know. Woods is an underground rapper from New York, although he was partly raised in Zimbabwe by his Marxist revolutionary writer father and his English professor mother, who hails from Jamaica. The bit of context here that really matters is that Woods has very specific insights into white supremacy, with Zimbabwe and Jamaica both being ravaged by the evils of European colonization, and the USA being, well, what it is. Woods's preference for staying anonymous is reflected throughout his work, and the theme of hidden things or secrets is already established in the album art for Golliwog, which features the titular Golliwog hiding in the bushes eerily like a spectre, its intentions ambiguous. Less ambiguous, though, is the actual history of the Golliwog, which, even on the surface, is a gross example of the lengths that Americans and Europeans will go to dehumanize Africans. The doll is a symbol of the lack of agency that Africans have had in forming their own identities, as well as the commodification of blackness and the exploitation of Africans as a whole. The irony of the Golliwog is that in the original story, the author seems to make some kind of attempt at having a moral about the importance of not judging people based on their appearances, as the Golliwog is revealed to the two white dolls as being quite harmless and actually friendly and nice. The story behind the story that first featured the Golliwog is a great example of how even a well-intentioned white person will inevitably dehumanize black people under white supremacy. The title of the track we're examining today also reflects this theme of hidden or secret things. Jump scares are a common trope in horror. A character finds themselves in a situation where they are being threatened by some sort of evil. As the audience watches, the evil makes its way toward the character. Tension is built and finally released in the form of a revelation. Woods handles his jump scare within the track using the same formula. The track is divided into 3 verses and a chorus that features twice. Once between verse 1 and verse 2, and then once between verse 2 and verse 3. The first verse serves to build tension, with the music box from Five Nights at Freddy's 2 featuring quite heavily in the production. Incidentally, in the game, the music box is used to wear off the marionette, a white-faced doll that stalks the player while they wait helplessly in a chair. I don't think that the fact that the marionette is pale-faced is an accident. Woods often uses sample choices to highlight themes within his music, and there's some interesting thematic similarities that can be found between Five Nights at Freddy's and the song. First is, of course, jump scares. Five Nights at Freddy's' whole deal is the jump scares, so it makes sense that Woods would draw from FNAF for his own song called Jumpscare. More importantly though, even a Five Nights at Freddy's novice will tell you that the real horror of the game is not the animatronics. They are possessed by the spirits of children who were murdered. The real horror is the serial killer who murdered them. Another thing that any FNAF fan will tell you is that the games are not chronological, with time skipping and location jumping between games being the norm. But, more importantly, cycles of violence against the powerless are featured prominently throughout the games. More on that later though. The track kicks off with the sound of a projector flickering, some obscure sonics that sound reversed, and then a looming ambience that writhes in the darkness before being penetrated by the sing-song melody of the music box, as if Woods is desperately trying to keep the dark forces at bay. Let's jump into line 1 of the first verse. Ragdoll playing dead. Woods' first words of the album introduce the titular character. Upon first listen, you might be tempted to think that the Golliwog is a Chucky-like character. However, notice the ambiguity of playing dead. This could frame the doll as the aggressor, like Chucky in the Child's Play franchise is lying, waiting for a moment to attack. This falls in line with the marketing for the album. Woods mentioned that as a child, he wrote a story about an evil Golliwog that comes alive, and that this album serves as a retelling of that story. One should note, though, that Woods was 9 years old, and his mother fobbed off the story as derivative. I kind of agree, an evil Golliwog is a little derivative, which is why I prefer the alternative explanation of this line. What if the Golliwog is a potential victim, playing dead to evade detection, and is representative of Woods' preference for anonymity and staying hidden? Perhaps Woods even is the doll in the story here. Woods goes on to describe the setting. Rabid dog in the yard, car won't start, it's bees in your head. Notice here how Woods uses second person, your head, for immersion, allowing the reader to feel trapped within the story. Additionally, the short syntax and lack of further descriptive details drive home the creepy ambiguity set up by Steel Tip Dove's production. He also draws from typical horror tropes, as well as symbols of urban neglect and decay. The dog is deranged, the car is defective, and the narrator's mind is in disarray. And where does the doll fit into all of this? The vagueness of it all gives it an unnerving quality. Woods often gets labeled as an abstract rapper, but his storytelling here is surprisingly straightforward. Like any great writer, though, Woods finds a way to weave commentary and complex ideas into very straightforward images. Take the rabid dog, for instance, which is a clear allusion to Stephen King's Cujo, a novel about a rabid dog that terrorizes a small town. Woods mentioned that Stephen King was a particular point of inspiration for this album, and his familiarity for King's work can be noted in Christine off of his album Ethiops. Sure enough, the whole setting in verse 1 feels very Stephen King inspired, but I think we need to dig even deeper. Fun fact, did you know that Cujo was named after the alias of a leftist revolutionary named Willie Wolf? Willie Wolf was a member of a far-left militant group named the Symbionese Liberation Army, labeled a terrorist group by the US government. However, if you know half a thing about world history, you'll know that most of the time, the ones that the US government decides are terrorists actually end up being the good guys. Anyway, the Symbionese Liberation Army became infamous when they kidnapped a young heiress, later turned actress, named Patty Hearst, daughter of media tycoon William Randolph Hearst. If you don't know who William Randolph Hearst is, you definitely have a few Wikipedia rabbit holes to go down, but all you need to know for now is two things. One, he was the inspiration behind the character of Charles Foster Kane in the movie Citizen Kane. The second thing you need to know is that William Randolph Hearst created a white supremacist propaganda machine in the form of a media empire that spent most of the 20th century pushing imperialist pro-American filth to most of the Western world. Hearst used his money, power, and influence to squash any potential threat of communism arriving in America. He once called Hitler the savior of Europe. Lovely guy. Anyway, the Symbionese Liberation Army kidnapped his daughter, Patty, and demanded that Hearst set up a scheme to feed the homeless in California. Hearst attempted to put together a scheme, but when the program fell through, the Symbionese Liberation Army refused to release Patty Hearst back to her father. Months later, Patty Hearst was recovered after spending months, eventually converting to the beliefs of the Symbionese Liberation Army and fighting with them. I won't get into the whole court case, but it's pretty clear that William Randolph Hearst did a pretty good job in de-radicalizing his daughter. She looked visibly drugged and incoherent on the stand, claiming that she was brainwashed by Symbionese Liberation Army rhetoric and was severely abused by her captors, despite her original story being that she was happier than ever in the SLA and even fell in love with Willie Wolfe, aka Cujo. Patty Hearst eventually denounced the months that she spent in the Symbionese Liberation Army. She even married a cop. Conversely, Willie Wolfe was burned to death by the LAPD in the crawl space of a house. Kind of reminds you of the first line of Spiderhole, doesn't it? Willie Wolfe's life is a moral tale that warns of how imperialists and colonizers distort and eventually can reverse the truth. History and the American justice system will make you believe that Patty Hearst was brainwashed by left-wing terrorists. The truth is that William Randolph Hearst used his money to brainwash, drug, and bully his daughter into testifying that the man she loved was evil, even though she knew it wasn't true. It wasn't difficult for Hearst to do either. After all, if you can brainwash an entire country, how hard is one person? Note that while this may seem tangential, later in the track, Woods explores the relationship between language and truth in much greater depth, so it's definitely a deliberate reference. And also, Woods has referenced Patty Hearst by name in his track Windhoek, which similarly tackles themes of survival and the fluid nature of truth. Check out these lyrics and look out for thematic similarities between it and Jumpscare. We survived. We were new in our own eyes. All the lies I'm about to tell are true. They just had to rhyme. We made it out alive. Next phrase. Car won't start. This is a typical horror movie trope. However, if you have an older car, like the one in the thumbnail of this video, it's a pretty believable scenario, as old cars act up all the time. Keep in mind that in low-income communities, a car is a luxury. Lots of people have dream cars, but to many, owning any car is the dream, even if it's a piece of shit that doesn't start. What if I told you that the car Woods is referring to here is specifically Woods' very own blaxploitation DeLorean? It's a time-traveling Afrofuturist Acura legend, which is reintroduced in verse 3. That detail isn't particularly important until the end of verse 1 though, so we'll put a pin in that for now. Next line. It's bees in your head. There are a couple of meanings here. The most obvious is that the narrator is frightened to death of the unseeable evil that is looming closer. But it's also likely a nod to the ravaging effects of mental illness among low-income black communities. The phrase bees in your head is often used to describe what being neurodivergent feels like. Woods has previously made reference to the overprescription of ADHD medication in the track Western Education is Forbidden, so I don't think that this interpretation is too much of a stretch. The final allusion here is to the classic 90s horror film Candyman, which is similarly saturated with the themes of urban decay and gentrification. The expelling of Africans and the African diaspora from their homes will feature more heavily later in the song. But I think it's worthwhile noting some basic history of the Candyman character. He originates from a 1985 short story by Clive Barker, who later became very famous for Hellraiser. The original story is about a black artist that is brutally murdered for falling in love with a white woman in the 1800s. I think the link to Patty Hearst there kind of speaks for itself. But what's also clear is this repeated idea of the real antagonist not being who you think they are at first. It's not Cujo, it's Hearst. It's not Freddy Fazbear, it's the purple guy. It's not the Candyman, it's his murderers. Next line. Daddy Longlegs stride your home like Cecil Rhodes. Okay, I take it back. Woods can be a little abstract at times. On the surface, Woods seems to be reinforcing the setting as one that is ghostly. It's neglected with spiders everywhere. Under the surface though, it appears some force or presence is ominously patrolling the property. The word stride has connotations of ownership and arrogance. Notice again how Woods uses the second person perspective to emphasize that the presence is an intrusive one and that it doesn't belong in the setting. Moreover, long legs could be a reference to the recent Osgood Perkins horror movie that covers themes of hidden evils lurking in the suburbs, which is quite apt considering the setting here. At the start of the film, Longlegs stalks around the protagonist's house. I also don't think it's an accident that Longlegs has a noticeably pale face. The spiders may also link to the image of bees earlier. Bees in your head, and there's spiders running around. Both could be interpreted as reflecting Billy's fractured mental state. What is definitely intentional is the simile of Cecil Rhodes, mentioned directly. If you don't know, Cecil Rhodes is one of the final bosses of colonization. We particularly hate him in Southern Africa for a variety of reasons. He was the owner of the British South Africa Company and De Beers. His main claim to fame was his Cape to Cairo railway vision, aimed at building Western infrastructure throughout Africa, a project made famous by the political cartoon that Woods is likely referencing here. His creation of the colonial state of Rhodesia, known today as Zimbabwe, was made possible by Rhodes's expropriation of land owned by black Africans, as well as enlisting them as slave labor in order to get the diamonds out the ground, something that is depicted in the chorus of the song. Woods has referenced the legacy of Cecil Rhodes previously in his work, but it's important to remember that Rhodes is only one part of the colonial machine. He is a puppet, a marionette, if you will. Cecil Rhodes is long dead and gone, but here in South Africa, and even in America, the effects of that machine are ever present. The real horror lurks beneath it all, like some sort of cosmic force. Let's move on to the next line. Death poems folded in breast pocket in my bedclothes. Just an aside here, a death poem is likely a reference to the Car song, whose subject matter concerns surviving the street life and evading fascistic police forces. Carr passed away in 2024, and I'd like to think that this is a little nod to him, while reinforcing the themes of urban decay in black communities. Woods never worked with Carr, but had a lot of love for him and his work. Apart from that reference, this is a fairly straightforward line. The switch to first-person perspective in my bedclothes confirms that Woods himself is present within the narrative. It also reinforces the theory that he is the rag doll in the story. The fact that his poems, probably his raps, are folded up reflects that they're not ready yet, so they're hidden away. We can link this to the car won't start metaphor from earlier on in the verse, as both represents Wood's reluctance or perhaps inability to use his agency to fight back against these oppressive forces, or at least escape them. The fact that the poems are in his breast pocket indicates that they are important to him. But thankfully the next few can be grouped together as a single thought. It's a dark road, but it ain't no accidents. No coincidences, it's all praxis. Some drove, some crawled, some ran glancing backwards, some ran ravenous. Keep in mind that thus far, nothing Woods has said has been explicitly about white supremacy. This set of lines is no different, as on the surface it appears to depict some sort of apocalyptic scenario where people have been turned into zombies. Woods is in his car trying to get away, and the world is going insane around him. The road can be read as a symbol for colonial institutions in both America and Africa, built in order to serve white interests. Roads are the perfect metaphor for this, as building a road is a deliberate decision, and in doing that, those in power can decide whose lives to enhance and whose to neglect. Think back to the Cecil Rhodes line here. Woods' meaning is clear. White supremacy and colonialism is a deliberate attempt to subjugate and disenfranchise the African people in order to enrich Europeans and Americans. Now fast forward to modern day America, which was built using the blood of immigrants, the sweat of African Americans, and the tears of Native Americans. An America that continues to subjugate these same peoples while extracting value from them. Can this road be altered? I think Woods argues no, reflecting his Afro-pessimistic outlook. Woods is cursed by his knowledge of the many revolutionaries who have tried to change this path and failed. The word praxis is a powerful one that emphasizes that white supremacists are committed to their cause and are deeply practiced in their racism. Whether it be Democrats who pretend to care about black people but never do anything for them, or Republicans who openly hate them. The idea of zombies is explained in greater depth later in the album. But on a surface level, zombies are often used to reflect how capitalism, colonialism, and cultural supremacy rob us of agency. Woods takes the time to comment on how different individuals participate in these colonial systems. Some people give in to the colonial institutions, using their privilege and advantages to outpace and outcompete the rest. Some drove. Some people are less privileged and have to claw their way out of poverty using sheer willpower. Some crawled. Some people try to participate in society, but turn to a life of crime and perpetual entrapment in the justice system because it's so deeply ingrained in them. Some ran glancing backwards. By the way, this last line is likely a reference to the story of Lot's wife in the Old Testament, who, upon fleeing with her family from the city of Gomorrah, looked back longingly at the city despite God's specific command for them not to. She was consequently turned into a pillar of salt as punishment. Finally, those that ran ravenous represents those who have embraced the greed that the road of capitalism encourages, and as a result are completely taken over with self-preservation and selfishness. The repeated syntax here of some reinforces the strength of this colonial grip. Into the next line. Tender is the flesh, slender imaginary friends. Tender is the Flesh is a 2017 horror satire novel that uses the metaphor of cannibalism to represent how the elites in society consistently treat the lower class. In the novel, animal meat is rendered inedible due to a virus, and so market forces seek to fill the gap by creating a human meat industry. Abuse and slavery ensue. Consumers run wildly down an apocalyptic path, mad with greed, eating each other, because that was the plan all along. Except whose plan was it? Enter the slender imaginary friends. If I'm being honest, the first thing that came to mind was Slender Man, and that very well might be on purpose, as Slender Man does have a pale face. But this could also be a reference to the marionette that the music box is meant to be keeping away. It could even be a reference to Longlegs from earlier. All these characters have pale faces and are controlled by some sort of evil force. The double entendre of imaginary friends is also notable. It could mean that the antagonist here is not real, just like how white supremacists keep insisting that white supremacy isn't real and it's all in your head. But it could also mean that the friendship offered by these slender friends is not sincere, it's imaginary. On to the next line. This winter, you'll eat to live. Summer, heat blew the grid. We have more references to decaying infrastructure, symbolizing how white power structures have no interest in preserving black lives. The line, you'll eat to live, sounds redundant as everyone has to eat to live. But combined with the previous line's reference, we can infer that Woods is once again emphasizing that in order to engage in society, you have to eat each other, figuratively speaking. Greed is the game, and the more you consume, the higher your energy requirements, meaning that the currently insufficient infrastructure is even less able to meet those needs. And the higher our energy demands, the more we contribute to a climate crisis that destroys what little infrastructure remains in vulnerable communities. The heat blew the grid. I think there's also something to be said of the fact that the setting thus far could be any poor community. The damage that white supremacy has done can be found in ghettos across the world, most of which have insufficient or non-existent access to electricity. Woods repeats the opening lines with some alterations. All the while, the music box fades out and is replaced with more obscure, frightening noises. Rabbit dog in the yard, car won't start, ragdoll playing dead. The repetition here makes Woods sound desperate, frantic, and his delivery sounds urgent and scared. You can imagine him playing dead in the car, hoping desperately that he'll survive. Then a sample from a French colonizer enters and is eventually smothered by the sound of flies or bees, before what sounds like the sound of car doors being locked, heightening the tension. The jump scare is then finally delivered, the sonic one, at least. The lyrics have their own revelation. One strip of tarmac lay through the wilderness to where the natives work the pits, so you don't eat the fish. One strip of tarmac lay through the wilderness to where the planes and ships sit. It's a grip. Woods does what he's always done in his lyrics. He takes you back in time, except in this story, it's literal. The chorus and verse 2 likely take place in Africa at some point in their colonial history, and the jump scare sound effect serves a dual role as the sound of Woods' Afrofuturist Acura legend warping through time and space. The real horror is that nothing has changed. Cecil Rhodes built infrastructure in Africa not to serve Africans, but Europeans, who want African wealth, but want Africans to do the work. The depressing irony here is that the setting is likely decades ago in Africa, but it might as well be today. De Beers still exists. They're paying shitty wages to Africans, and they're still shipping diamonds out to rich white people. As if to add insult to injury, the local aquatic life has been poisoned and killed, probably from the mining operation, leaving the local people with no fish to eat. Woods has moved through time and space to try escape this oppression, only to find exactly the same thing happening at a completely different point in reality. Woods handles the colonial symbols here deftly. Cars, ships, planes, and roads are all drawn from the lexical field of transport, and they symbolize the institutions that white supremacy has used for hundreds of years to rob Africans of wealth and agency. Conversely, the natives, the wilderness, and the fish are symbols of indigenous pride and beauty. The final line of the chorus exemplifies the message of Jumpscare. It's a grip. White supremacy is a constant, ever-present force of cosmic evil that continues to haunt our world. You may be fooled into thinking that the grip has loosened, but think again. The grip is as tight as ever. Let's perhaps end things on a lighter note. You're probably wondering why MF Doom is in the thumbnail of this video, and I promise it's not clickbait. The whole first verse can be read as a tribute to Doom, with the Afrocentrist Acura legend likely being a reference to the Victor Vaughn alias that Doom had and his time-traveling shenanigans. Specifically, I think the point of reference here is Vaudeville Villain, an album where Doom plays a misanthropic loner from the future who gets stranded in modern-day New York and has to try fix his time machine. Both Woods and Doom's time machines are giving them trouble, and they're trying to use them to escape a sticky situation. You could even think of Woods' Golliwog character as his own alias, just like how Doom had Victor Vaughn, with both characters being more villainous, menacing versions of the rapper's personas. If you think that's a reach, keep in mind that the circumstances surrounding the recording of Golliwog and Vaudeville Villain, respectively, also have some parallels. Doom recorded Vaudeville Villain during an interim period where he was waiting for Madlib to finish Mad Villainy after it had been leaked, whereas Woods recorded Golliwog in a period where he was waiting for Elucid to finish his solo album before they could begin their next collaborative effort with Arm & Hammer. Not to mention, the rest of Golliwog is jam-packed with Doom references. Vaudeville Villain is a super underrated album, by the way. I finally gave it a listen to research for this video, and it's fantastic. It's slightly more jarring and industrial than some of Doom's jazzier stuff, but his rapping is unmatched. Woods' dense lyricism and layered meanings in the first verse serve as a fitting nod to Doom's lyricism in Vaudeville Villain. If you're going to pay respect to Doom, I suppose you have to bring your A game. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for part 2. This video took countless hours of listening and reading and research, so I would greatly appreciate a like and a subscribe. And if you have any of your own thoughts to add, corrections or suggestions for a future video, please let me know by dropping a comment. Huge thank you to the rap community, specifically Mike Seatown, That Dope Shift, Professor Sky, and the Genius contributors for their own thoughts and dissections of Woods' latest album. I'd like to thank Woods as well for making such a thought-provoking piece of literature. I think it goes without saying that Woods is one of the most important voices, not only in hip-hop, but music and culture generally. My aim here was to highlight on a linguistic level why this song is so spectacular. I hope that I accomplished that goal. Cheers, guys.